And, you know, we just want to get this information out and share this information so that parental families and families that work with young people can be more equipped and at the very least more aware of what is going on. Please keep in mind that there is a chat function. This is not a space where I want this to be where I'm just lecturing to you. So I really do invite you to communicate with me and to make commentary and to share your concerns, share your frustrations. I understand that some of this dialogue may also be triggering, and I want you to know that that's okay. Sometimes you may go back and you know, these conversations may create and remind you of memories that you may have pushed down or you may have suppressed. I want you to know that that's okay. I want you to know that this is not about judgment or shame, but we're just all here to learn from one another, okay? And so I'm going to be sharing my screen, but again, this is a share space. This is a safe space. There are not any bad questions. I just truly, for this length of time, just want to engage you, okay? And so I'm going to pull up my presentation here and share my screen with you. You can't hear me as well. I will check. Let me know if this is better.
No.
Is that better?
Worse.
That's worse.
It's worse. Okay. Let me see here. Is this better?
It's worse.
It's worse. Okay. Let me. I do have a mic here. Is this better?
Yes.
Can anyone hear me, or if you can type?
It's definitely better.
Yes.
I'm hoping that are you picking up my information? I did do a test run, so I want to make sure that everyone is hearing me. Can everyone hear me? If someone can type a message. Okay, be right back. Let's see, Darylyn, we can hear you. Okay, and I will speak a little louder. I'm getting different responses. So some are saying that they hear me good, so I'm going to continue. But if there are any challenges, please just let me know. I'm here to. Great, thank you, Veronica. Really appreciate it. See, and we're already engaging. That's exactly what I need. That's exactly what I need. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. And can everyone see my screen here? It will say mute R.Kelly, unmute the conversation. And I am going to speak louder. Okay. Okay, great. Everyone can see this. So let's begin with our objectives. These are the 3 objectives that I really want to engage you with, that I want you to get out of this program. So my first objective is participants will be able to identify and distinguish child paraphilias, and I will define what a paraphilia is. Participants will be able to apply self-knowledge to advise their child how to navigate safer sex situations. And parents or participants, okay, I do see a note that my bandwidth may be a little low. So I'm noticing that, and I'm noticing that we have other people chiming in. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I am going to try my hotspot because I want to make sure that my bandwidth is Okay, if you could give me just one moment. I see everyone here, and I just want to make sure that everyone is hearing me. And Bert, I see that you have returned, and I'm going to see if here, and hopefully everyone is still with me. And I'm still waiting to connect. And again, please give me any feedback that will help, because I want to make sure that this experience is pleasant for everyone. Just a reminder, I did change platforms because in rehearsing to work with GoToMeeting, I found that it was technologically difficult for myself, and I thought that it might be difficult for other people, and I wanted to make sure that everyone is able to connect. So I just wanted to consider
Bert.
Okay. Says we're connected. Okay, and thank you again for joining us. So back to what I was saying, these are my objectives, and parents or participants will be able to describe and identify promiscuous behaviors, I apologize for the typo, and skin hunger behaviors. And so we're going to define these things as well. So what are child paraphilias, and what is a paraphilia? Just a quick question, if everybody could let me know. Has anyone heard of the term paraphilia? If you could type in your chat, I would like to know. Community as well, that I'm excited. Yes, Ash has. Let's see, who else has? No. Okay, Melissa has. Who else has heard of paraphilia? Okay, only for me. Okay. Some of our other guests, because we do have 18 guests, if you can let me know if you've heard of a paraphilia before. Okay, good, good, good. So that's a good thing that more people are becoming informed about paraphilias. But for my viewing audience that has not heard of a paraphilia before. A paraphilia is a type of what sexologists may consider a type of deviant sexuological behavior. And so they really, for us to work with people who have different types of sexual dysfunctions or sexual challenges, desires that may be not considered on the normal stream, we call those paraphilias, and so that we can work with people in that community. And so it's really important, because the more we support them and the more we help them, the more we protect our children. So I wanted to make sure that I defined some of the paraphilias that are around children. So if we look at this slide here, pedophile, adult sexually attracted to a child prepubescent age. And for those who are not familiar with some of this language, prepubescent means before puberty, before their bodies start to develop. So we're talking about anywhere from baby infant stage up to when the child begins to mature, before they start to bud, before the menses, before the boys get a little funky. So that is prepubescent age. Hebophilia is an adult attracted to a young person ages 10 to 14. Ephebophilia is an adult attracted to young adults post-pubescent age, 15 to 19. And pederasty are homosexual relationships between an adult male and pubescent or adolescent male. And I think it's really important that we define this as well, because some people think that if you're a pedophile and you mess with boys, then maybe perhaps you're not a cisgendered heterosexual male. And so someone's sexual identity may still not have anything to do with their paraphilia. So an adult male could still be attracted to young boys or girls, but they could still be married. They could still have a wife. They could still be attracted to women. So we definitely do not want to confuse the two. Again, if you have questions about this, type in the chat because I want to create a dialogue with all of you. I think that it is really important that in watching the docuseries, and so many people were arguing, they kept saying and using the term, he's a pedophile. And if we go by the definition, actually, R.Kelly would be considered an ephebiophile. And why is that important? That is important because when we reference R.Kelly and we note his pattern, so he has a pattern of behavior, so he selects an age group that is mature enough to be on their own. So these young ladies can shop on their own, they can go to school, they can come home on their own, they don't need to be picked up, they are just starting to go into their own autonomy, their own independence. They go shopping alone. They may spend a night at a girlfriend's home. So that's just enough independence for R.Kelly. But then it's also at an age where it's immature enough for him to manipulate these young girls, right? And so this ripe age, when we think about puberty, because in the puberty age, that's when everything happens, right? That age right between 10, 11, and 22 is when life happens. It's when you first fall in love. It's when you get your first erection. It's when you experience first death. It's when you have your first love. You lose your virginity. It's when you may break more bones. It's when your body starts to develop. It's when a girl gets her breasts. It's when a girl gets her menses. So everything is happening during that pubescent time. And a lot of times as adults, we forget how much young people are going through at that time. And so it's really important to keep in mind how important that is, because we forget that that young person is still developing. They're still developing at that age. And so we say, you know, you're too old to be doing that. And I can't believe you did that. You know better. And it's like, no, actually, that's what people their age do, because they are not at that maturity level to do what you believe that they should already understand. They're still growing and evolving. And so we need to be mindful of that, because predators, sexual predators, people have paraphilia, like R.Kelly, are mindful of it. And they're more mindful of it than our parents, than our teachers. They understand this. And so when we look at his pattern, once they cross that age of threshold, which is 18, they are technically considered adults. And once they're 18, it's no longer constituted as breaking the law. And that's what we saw in this docuseries, where they're like, well, no, I can't believe, you know, he took these girls and the court dismissed the case, and we're seeing young girls being manipulated and not testifying against him. And people are confused. And people can't ponder why his lawyers are able to defend his behaviors. And he did that with intention and mindfulness. Yes, yes, thank you, DeMarcella. He is very, very intentional. And so right when girls are in their 20s, I noticed in the documentary how the abuse started to grow. And in this series, they talked about these young women not being able to go to the bathroom. They talked about how his wife was separated from the rest of the house and what was going on. They talked about how he isolated his victims and his prey. And so right in the 20s, he gets more abusive, and that's at the age where he can discard them. That's at the age where he no longer cares because they are out of that 15 to 19-year-old range. And what does he do? He becomes crueler. He discards the older women, even though they're in their 20s. They're young women. And then he goes back down the ladder to find what? Another 15, 16, 18-year-old girl. So this is why it's really important that we understand the difference between a pedophile and a hephebophilia, edophilia, and pederasty. Ooh, wow, that was a lot I tried to say all at one time. They are correct. Dee Marcella was saying that they are no longer useful. They're easier to manipulate. And that's why the courts, remember, the courts require that when someone is found guilty, it is beyond a shadow of a doubt. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. So that is very difficult to measure when there could just be one slight, maybe. One slight, well, I don't know, she seemed fast. I don't know, her body is real mature. I don't know, I don't like the way she presents herself. She doesn't look like a victim. And she may not look like a victim because she's in the 15 to 19-year-old range. So I bring up these here differentiations for a reason. And I've had some people say, well, what's the difference? And I'm like, legally, it is a huge difference. Socially, it is a huge difference. Let's understand that pedophiles would never be attracted to a young person that's developed. So it's very important that we understand the difference. And also, when I think about mothers, when I think about my own experience as a survivor, if I can share with you, my mother married her husband when I was about 9 years old. And my mother's husband was not attracted to me at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I was a very late developer. Thanks, God, for hooking me up later. Okay. Come 16, 17, my stepfather began to flirt with me. And it made me uncomfortable, but I felt the pressure of wanting to keep my family together, wanting to make sure that my mother was happy, wanting to go to school with the rest of my friends whose parents were married, and I wanted to be a part of this idea of having a nuclear family, and so I silenced myself. I silenced my discomfort. And this predator understood that I would. Why? Because I'm between the ages of 15 to 19. I'm not mature enough to understand what this predator is doing, and he's manipulating me. And he's touching me in ways that were completely inappropriate. And I would just learn to keep my distance. But I never told my mother. I did not tell my mother until she was divorcing him. And that was 13, almost 14 years later. So let's be mindful of where our children are on the spectrum of maturity. I have some responses here. Melissa says, thank you for breaking these nuances down. Yeah, we have to, thank you, Melissa, because we do have to pay close attention to this. If we're not mindful of this blind spot, because this is a blind spot, we think that once our children can drive on their own, once our children can go to the grocery market on their own, they can fix their own eggs, they are safe. And they are not safe. Even if your child is 19, 20 years old, even if he is 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. Let's not take for granted our young children, our mature children are not safe. We have another comment. And even if you said something, you are now the age that some mothers see daughters as a threat, and you would be blamed. And that's true, too. There are mothers who recognize that the dating pool is small, that they need additional support in the home, and a second income is a big deal. And that mother is going to sometimes make some really hard choices, and she may be making those hard choices based on her own traumas as a young person and what she was taught from her mother and the mothers before that, because there's a lot of social conditioning. And so this is how these experiences kind of snowball. This is how these experiences become generational. And this is how, no matter what traumas we have to survive, we adjust because we've normalized these traumas. So it is really, really important to diagnose where these predators are on the spectrum of these paraphilias and where our young people are. Look at them at every age and understand that there's a blind spot and there is a place that you need to examine who is befriending your child, who is in your child's life, what family members may make you, kind of raise an eyebrow. And let's be very clear, I should point this out too. Even if you are not sure, if you have no evidence, but the hairs on your arms stand up for whatever reason, you are to approach your child and create a safe space for them. Even if you're not sure, even if you have no proof, that is very, very, very important. So I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that. I love these people. They're all like, you see a doctor over in the corner, and you see some mothers and young girls. And because I asked this question, how do you define a child? Can you guys send me some comments on how you define what a child is? I would like to see your comments right now. How do you define a child? And I'm going to look at your chats. Don't all just pop up at once. Anyone have any commentary on how they define a child? How do you define a child? Under 18. Okay. Anyone else? A person I created who is still themselves. Yes. I understand, because as a parent, your child is always going to be your child. Anyone else have any other ways to define what a child is? Because I think it's very different for everyone. Emotional maturity and chronological age below age 18. Great. That is another good definition. How else do we describe a child? It can be defined based on age, but they can vary depending on societal laws and norms. Very, very, very true. I think that this is really important because there are all of these ways that we describe a child. A parent describes a child differently than the law describes a child, differently than the state describes a child. And children are also defined by their ethnicity. They're defined by their gender. They're defined by their height. We have 14-year-olds, God bless their parents, who are 6'3", and they're 14. And how it's hard to say, oh, this is my baby, this is my child. If that 14-year-old was 5'2", we would say, okay, that's a child. But when that 14-year-old is 6'3", we do not consider that young boy a child. We have another comment. My 12-year-old says a child is anyone younger than her. We argue that point. Yes, some preteens will get you, right? And that's why sometimes I say younglings, I say young people, I say little people. What about people who have mental disabilities and challenges? That is another exception to the rule. I agree, Bert, definitely. And so when we adultize children, we create more challenges for ourselves. And when I say adultize, one of the things that I always point out that we confuse young people on, we will say 14, 15, yes, I need you to watch your brothers, watch your sisters. They may be 1, 2, 3 years old. And we're putting this responsibility on them for a number of reasons, because we have to work, because we have to get to the store and there's no one else, because we don't have support systems. And then in that same breath, we will say, you're too young to have children. You're too young to have sex. You're too young to be thinking about relationships. But you put the responsibility of a child in their hands. That is a confusing message. So when we start to adultize kids, and then the 12-year-old says, no, a child is younger than me, I understand where they're coming from, because, again, their minds have not matured enough yet to understand all of the challenges and have all the foresight that as many of us adults have. And let's be mindful, there are still some adults who still have not reach the height of maturity. So we can only imagine what's happening with a 13, 14, 15-year-old brain, or 18, 19, 20-year-old brain that is still developing. So that is really, really important. Gender, when we look at boys, we always, give them the credit saying, oh, they'll be okay. Oh, don't cry. Don't show emotion. So we're putting, again, our young people in compromising spaces when we ourselves have trouble defining what a child is. And parents, be mindful that society, that the law, that the police, that sexual predators are going to view your child different than how you view your child. So please keep that in mind. I think that is really important. And where did my PowerPoint go? So I asked this question, and speaking of our young people's needs, why are girls and boys sexually vulnerable? And I have all of these pieces of the puzzle here because there are many, many pieces of the puzzle. I acknowledge and recognize that I am just scratching the surface. And I'm just scratching the surface. So while this is a starter conversation, I want you to be mindful that there are still more blind spots to this. And so, yes, we really have to work on the piece of the puzzle. And let me see here. My slides are all over the place, so we're going to fast forward that. Going back to our pieces of the puzzle. So I wanted to talk about these 5 bullet points because in the forefront of my mind, again, I'm talking about blind spots. I'm talking about skin hunger. I'm discussing parental disconnectedness and naivete. I'm discussing why people believe that somehow boys are safer or easier than girls. You ever hear that term? Well, boys are easier. I wish I had a boy because boys are easier. Boys are not easier. Gender-focused sex shaming, and biological and social age. So I'm going to ask the audience again, if you could chime in. Have you heard of skin hunger before? If you could let me know whether you've heard of skin hunger before, because I really want to hone in on this. If you could chime in, give me some feedback on skin hunger. Yes, I will move this up. Thank you for that commentary. Is that better? I hope that that's better for everyone. Okay, so some have said they've never heard that before. What else do I have? Anyone else? Beverly says that she's heard it before. Any other commentary? So let me explain and give a small history on skin hunger and where this term comes from. When you first have a newborn baby, there are nurses in the infirmary that wrap and they coddle and they swaddle and they hold the baby. And that is mandated. That is required. We saw Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade holding the baby for bonding. That is very important. The reason that it is required to do that, if you only feed the baby, if you feed it, if you change the diaper, but you never touch it, the baby will die. It is called failure to launch. And that is because our largest organ is our skin, and it mandates that you connect with the skin. And so when we fail to recognize that our young people need touch, we are making those young boys and girls vulnerable to predators. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the study, I have a triangle here in what is my right-hand corner. And it says self-actualization, esteem, love and belonging, what else? Safety, and then the psychological needs. So that self-actualization is like whatever I need in that moment, that is my priority. That is a priority before how I feel for myself. That is a priority above being loved and being approved by my parents. That is a priority before safety. And that is a priority before food, water, shelter, and sleep. It's a priority. Being touched is a biological need. So the struggle is that we have adults referring to young people, particularly girls, as promiscuous, as fast, as she's too grown, without considering the family dynamic and environment in which she was nurtured from or lack thereof.
Okay.
And so we really have to be mindful of our young people's needs, that it is a priority. So when we consider a predator like R.Kelly, and these girls kept saying they needed something from him. They needed it. They needed that attention. They needed that touch. As long as I have worked with parents, which has been literally all of my life, I started at daycare when I was 9 years old. I watched parents allow their children to leave home without hugs and affection, without have a good day, without the high five. And by the time they get to school, they are seeking a friend, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a teacher, a principal, an adult, could be any adult, to touch and hug them. So it's very important that we begin to hone in on the physical touching needs of our young children so that they are not vulnerable. There are studies that show that the more affectionate you are to a child, the more they excel in their work, the more they excel in school. Think about our young boys on football and basketball teams and sports teams, and how the coaches always high five and a pat on the backside, and normally that would be considered inappropriate in other spaces, but that's okay because there's affection there and there's support there, and those boys receive that because they need that touch. And when that coach does not high-five them, when that coach does not pat them on their helmets and give them a pat on the back, and they, bump in chest and everything, they feel isolated. So we have to think about, how touch really plays a role in our young people connecting to us, and even more so how that keeps them safe. So I really want you to be mindful of that. Are there any questions about skin hunger that anyone wants to share? Thank you for joining the meeting. If there aren't questions or comments, please, again, this is an open forum for all of us to communicate. Let's go to parental, that falls into parental disconnectedness and naivete. There are families who grew up and who grow up generationally not touching, and that's normalized. And I want you to know why that's not healthy, and I want you to use that docuseries as an example of one of the worst case scenarios that can occur when we are not connected to the youth that we are surrounded by, because they have that need. One of the things I love about young boys, especially the tough ones, or even the tough young girls, and you ever try and hug them and they resist and they say no, and they fight it and they resist, and then when you finally get them in and you hold them, they break down. They break down. They've been holding and fighting it for so long, and they cave. And sometimes they cry because they've been longing for it so long, and they felt rejected for so long. And when they finally receive it, it is overwhelming. So let's not be naive to the fact that it's a young man or a boy, or he's too big now, or she's too developed now. Let's tune into our young people. And that segues me into the boys are safe, boys are easy. Boys are not easy. What that really suggests is that we are not spending enough time supporting our boys, informing our boys, using language. If you gave a test to 10 girls and 10 boys on how to identify, whether you can identify your genitalia and the labels of your genitalia, less than 30% of the boys would be able to identify their own genitalia and how to label it. They wouldn't know their vas deferens. They wouldn't know their scrotum. They wouldn't understand how to identify their testes. And so what that says is, when they can't identify their body and the value in their body, it's going to be very difficult for them to have value in anybody else's body. So boys are not safe, and we cyclically keep creating a society where we have boys that don't feel like there's any value in their body, and then they're not appreciating and respecting other bodies. Then you can discard the bodies. Then you can number the girls that you slept with, and you can count them, because those bodies don't matter. They're numbers. They're not people. And I see boys, and they say, oh, I've been with 5 girls. But they didn't say I was with Lisa and Sheree and Kesha and Janelle. They count them. And that's because boys are not safe and they don't feel safe. If someone were to violate them, you know, because there is so much homophobia, and if it were a man, he might feel that that's a gay act, and he might not disclose his sexual trauma. So boys are not safe. So let's keep that in mind. Gender-focused sex shaming. I'll move on to that. And again, if there's any commentary, please feel free to add commentary or to add questions. I am here to receive your questions and commentary. We're so focused on fast girls. We have slut, whore, skank, she's fast, promiscuous, she out there, she a thought, which means that hoe over there. Like every, I don't know, 6 months or something, there's a new name to disgrace a girl. And so as long as we continue to keep these names out there, as long as we popularize terms like bitch, we are marginalizing girls and women even more. So let's be mindful of the language that we use. Let's be mindful that these girls are actually not promiscuous, that they have a skin hunger like anyone else, and they need to be embraced so that they will be safe and so that they feel loved. Finally, my next point is biological versus social age. I'm wondering if everyone understands what I mean by biological and social age. So the biological age is the age that they were born, but your social age is where your maturity level is, and then there's your aesthetic age. So we know, because heaven only knows what type of antibiotics and drugs are in our food today, and our children are developing at an accelerated rate. But there's always been a girl whose body matured before they do. And so that makes them even more sexually vulnerable. When our boys have, you know, muscles and abs, because that's a thing now, it may make them more sexually vulnerable because they become targets. So we need to consider the difference between the biological age and the social age. They are two distinct entities, and we should regard them as such. And the more developed our children are, the taller that they are, we start to speak to them a different way. And when I work with my children, I love to say, if they ask me a certain question and I feel like it's a little too mature for them, I say, you know, that's more of a 17-year-old question. You can ask me a 14-year-old question, but you can't ask me a 17-year-old question. And they come back and they think about it and they say, okay. And I'm reminding them that they still have time to grow and to evolve, and that we can take our time with it, that I'm still open to their questions. But I want them to know that they are not at the maturity level that I would like them to be at to have the best conversation that I can have with them. So that is very important as well. Are there any other questions or comments before I move on to the next slide? Feel free to share. I'll move on. So as we are coming around the corner and wrap up the dialogue, and I thank you all for chiming in and hanging out with me, I want to make sure that we eliminate some of the blind spots. And again, I'm only touching the surface, but I wanted to point out a few important ideas and ways for us to receive this information. When parents say, you know, it's a safe space, parents always say, you can come to me. No, you can't. As parents, you know, our kids are always going to be concerned about our judgment and the consequences and disappointing you. So that's not always going to be a safe space for your child or for your children. So do not assume you are a safe space. Yes, we want to be, but it still has its limits. And thank you for joining. Also, what is important, what you can do, though, is select a go-to person outside of yourself that your child can turn to. And ask your child, if there was anyone that you felt like if you couldn't tell me something, who could you speak to? And whoever that person is, create a small circle, have a day, and just sit down and just say, listen, I wanted you to know that, I trust this person, and that if there's something that you can't say to me, I want you to always feel like you can go to this person, and I will trust that they'll give you the proper feedback, but I want you to have a safe space. Create another safe space for them. Let them know that that is there. Again, hug and show affection every single day. Every day. You will see the change in your child. I can't express how important it is. I can't express how many people, but young people particularly, suffer from skin hunger. If you would like some reading on skin hunger, I am happy to email you some resources and share that information with you. Also, this is a big one. Visit doctors yearly. So what happens is young people go to the doctor when they need their shots for school and when they break something. And anything in between that, they don't get to see doctors. And then they associate doctors with something negative, and especially our boys. So our boys are not getting checked out like they should, and it's because we have not created a healthy pattern of building relationships with our doctors. If you have young girls and you take them to get a pap smear yearly as they hit puberty, and make it a thing either at their birthday and you have a celebration around it and you say, yes, after your annual checkout, we're going to go get cupcakes and we're going to hang out for the day and catch a movie. Make it a positive experience. It is also a way that should, heaven forbid, there have been a sexual predator, because sexual predators will oftentimes not have protected sex with their victims and those that they are trying to victimize, you would be made aware of that, especially at ages 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. That doctor could share that information with you, and we can catch those flags. So it's very important that you make sure that your child is visiting the doctor yearly, and as they evolve into young adults and adults, they have this practice, this natural practice, and we are normalizing going to the doctor, normalizing having a healthy sexual behavior, having a healthy sexual life. Young people are more prone to say, hey, well, you can go to my doctor too, if you need anything. They can get advice, and it'll be safe and secure advice, and you can trust that. So, again, definitely visit doctors yearly. Add this to your calendars. 2019, you have a child that has hit puberty, add it to your 2019 calendar. Also, celebrate their bodies and development. Unfortunately, I was a kid. I felt like an ugly duckling when I was a kid, and my mother just wasn't the affectionate type. She just honed in on the books. But feeling insecure made me very vulnerable. So it's very important that we celebrate. I was a late developer. I went to an all-girl high school. I think out of 800 girls, I was the only one wearing undershirts at 14, 15, 16 years old, and it was hard for me. And no one said, your body is okay. No one said, you have a beautiful body. No one talked about why different girls breasts are larger or smaller. Nobody talked about mammary glands and that women produce milk and went through these explanations. So I was just like, Lord, like, hook a sister up, and he didn't for a long time, and it impaired me. And the same thing for our boys. We have to celebrate, when the boys start developing and going through puberty and they get real funky and they get a little facial hair and they get hair under their armpits and they're having wet dreams and they're going through all of these things, we must normalize it. It is natural. And so we have to celebrate their bodies, because if we don't, a sexual predator will. And that is a guarantee. Also, celebrate your child's relationships. Stop telling your children that, well, let me take this back. I want to share advice, and I can't tell you what to do, but I will say that when we celebrate our child's relationships, when they have a boyfriend and girlfriend, we have a prime opportunity to teach them about healthy relationships. We have a prime opportunity to socialize them around monogamy and safe practices. And if they're not going to be monogamous or non-monogamous, we have a prime opportunity to make sure that our young people are safe, that they're not hiding information from us, because when they hide, because we do not celebrate them experiencing love, they will hide, and then they're not being safe, because if you feel like you are doing something wrong, you are less likely to take the necessary precautions, right? You are less likely to use condoms. You are less likely to go to a clinic with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. And then boys, too, we oftentimes, if they reach teenagers, we just say, here, and we give them a condom. Stop doing that. You need to have a conversation with the boy, with our young men, and before you give a condom, ask them who the person is. Ask him if he cares about her. Ask him why he cares about her. And allow him to think about those things. Is this just a conquest? Is he feeling pressured? Is he feeling pressured by a teacher or another sexual predator? Because this is definitely happening. There are more and more reports coming out about female teachers assaulting our young boys. And, there's not the same legislative punishment for women violating boys as there is in some instances for men violating girls. And then once again, we're teaching our boys that their bodies do not have value. So when a boy puts a condom in his pocket, and then the pocket is warm, because when we put our hands in our pocket, we warm it up, and then we're impacting the spermicide in the condom, and then the condom is not as effective as it could be unless it was stored correctly. That is going to be a challenge. And he's going to say, if he got her pregnant, he's going to say, but I used the condom. And then nobody's going to believe him. And it's because we're only giving boys condoms without showing them the proper way to use it. So we need to celebrate relationships. And finally, we also need to respect puberty. I hear so many parents trying to put a hold on what is natural and biological, and Mother Nature and God, she said, this is what the body has to go through. These are the feelings the body has to go through. These are the hormones that go through the body naturally that is saying, hey, I need to connect with someone, and this is how I build my self-awareness and my self-esteem through my connections. So we should respect puberty. We can no longer afford to believe in this concept of abstinence when it is not effective, and it puts our young people at risk. And again, it also makes them vulnerable to sexual predators, because they're going to do what the adult asks them to do. So in creating a safe space, again, these are just some of the blind spots that I found it very, very important to highlight. if you have more information that you would like me to share with you, if you have questions that you would like me to ask, I will be sending a survey because I do want to get as much information from you about this first webinar as possible. And I have really enjoyed everyone sticking on with me. And you know, it's been a great experience. I'm sitting here trying to find my video. I have all of these windows open here, and I have just really enjoyed spending this time with you. And I hope even more so that I've been able to share with you information that will really help you, that that we can use this to grow on. So again, this is just really touching the surface, but we have to touch the surface and we have to have more conversation. Beverly, thank you so much. I'm glad that it was insightful for you. Thank you, Melissa. I really, you know, as educators, as community, I want to build this community with all of you so that we get this information out to parents. You know, we know that enough parents aren't asking for sex education in schools, and so let's not rely on health teachers. Let's be very clear. A health teacher is not a sex educator. A health teacher can still have bias. A health teacher can still be uncomfortable with talking about certain topics, but I am here to give my all to make sure that people are safe and that people understand what sex education is really about, and that it's about being sex positive so that we can minimize these types of experiences, and that we can do more than just survive R.Kelly. We can change our society, and we can change the impact once we understand what pedophilia is and the paraphilias that surround pedophilia, and keep our young people safe at every age. So again, I thank you all for sticking in with me. I'm going to let you go on and have your Saturday morning. Like I said, I will send a survey, just a very brief, like a 4-question survey out to everyone, and maybe we can do this again soon in the future. So again, I thank you all. Have a beautiful weekend. Stay dry, stay safe, stay warm, and make sure you hug a child. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.